Good evening, and welcome to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, and to the 9th season of the Artisan Lectures, and to our final lecture of the season. And as you can tell from tonight's setup, it's a very special and a very different lecture. This program is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. The General Society was founded in 1785 by the skilled craftsmen of New York City, artisans who represented 22 different trades, including carpenters, blacksmiths, saddlers, tailors, and silversmiths, among many other professions. Today, our 234-year-old organization continues to serve the people of the City of New York through our various educational and cultural programs. These include the library, of which, of course, you're in this evening, our John M. Mossman Lock Museum collection, and you're welcome to have a look after tonight's program, our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, and finally, our nearly 200-year-old lecture series, of which, of course, tonight is part of. The Artisan Lecture Series is also our tribute to those original 22 artisans who founded our organization. Tonight, as I mentioned, for the conclusion of our series, we have such a special program to celebrate artisanship. An introduction to the American Hand Archive with Vanessa Hoheb and Thomas Donahue. The American Artist Hand Archive endeavors to document artist hands with the goal of establishing an archive for exhibition. Now, as you will find out later this evening, we will have a unique opportunity to examine in person some of the American Artist Hand Archive's bronze life castings of some of the country's most prominent and influential visual artists. Vanessa Hoheb and Thomas Donahue met at Pratt Institute in 1975 and have collaborated professionally for 40 years. They combined their skills of modeling, mold making, casting, and restoration with classically trained backgrounds in painting and sculpture to address the challenges in realizing the works of a wide range of visual artists. Both are extraordinarily talented, and I'm so proud to say active and valued members of the General Society. Thomas Donahue, in one of his many roles, is also artistic director of our window displays, including the stunning windows he's installed for tonight's talk. Vanessa and Thomas continue to advise and oversee a great range of projects that have included, and this is just a tiny selection of some of the projects they've been involved in, casting a collection of Willem de Kooning sculptures, heading the team responsible for the restoration of the Statue of Liberty's copper outer skin, and designing the prestigious Saxton Award for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. All these projects have afforded them valued relationships with some of the most influential makers of our time. The American Artist Hand Archive is a natural outgrowth of these experiences. The archive is the manifestation of their shared passion for the work of human hands, the essential need to create, and the desire to acknowledge the well-celebrated and the under-celebrated artists of our time. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you tonight Vanessa Hoheb and Thomas Donahue.
Thank you, Karin. Looking out at it, I feel like I should be feeding you. I have nothing for you to eat, but I hope I have something for you to digest here. I just want to start out by saying good evening and express tremendous gratitude just for how many of you have come out here to help us introduce the American Artists and Archive. Are we okay, sound-wise? There we go. In planning this evening, we obviously wanted to create something that was a bit different from a normal lecture format, so that we could afford you a unique opportunity, an intimate experience of this ongoing project. In addition to Vanessa and I having individually presented here at the library before, we were, like Karin said, inducted into the Society in 2014. So on behalf of Vanessa and I, as members, I'd like to echo Karin's welcome to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York. It took me years to remember all of that. And as Karin mentioned, the library is on the cusp of its 200th anniversary. 1820 was when the library was opened. And we are in the midst of a series of lectures that was started in 1837. The General Society, founded by those 22 artisans and tradesmen 234 years ago, more than 2 centuries later, were assembled here tonight in the same spirit. I looked at the list of folks who are here, and by my accounting tonight in the library, we are hosting architects, electricians, engineers, a jeweler, sculptors, machinists, painters, industrial designers, photographers. We have a calligrapher, a bookmaker, poets and playwrights. We have teachers, we're all students. We have practitioners of the healing arts, the culinary arts, and the collaborative arts of the theater. So I can't help but think that the founders, 234 years ago, would be kind of proud of the fact that we're still gathering people who care about things that are made by hands. Our library, I just wanted to point out tonight too, is decorated with bunting and flags in preparation for the reading of the Declaration of Independence tomorrow. The General Society has, without fail, through times of peace and times of war, depression and prosperity, times of patriotic confidence and times of democratic growing pains, faithfully, publicly, have read this document since 1793 without missing a year. We have had several opportunities to exhibit the archive bronzes and have shown a selected few at other venues, but our deep affection for the General Society made it important for this setting and this community to be the first public introduction to the entire archive collection to date. The General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York is a mouthful, but there is one word in that long title that is of particular importance tonight. That word is mechanic. To our contemporary ears, the word brings up images of local garages and oil changes and unexpected invoices. But mechanic is a very, very old word. It refers to the work of human hands. It speaks to the relationship between practitioner, implement, and material. The word mechanic has common roots with terms such as resourcefulness, inventiveness, utility, and inspired ingenuity. The American Artists Hand Archive endeavors to document, to celebrate, and to acknowledge the important contribution of mechanics who express themselves through the disciplines of the visual arts. Some 200 years before the Society's founding, there was a scientific notion that hoped to explain how our external world, perceived by our senses of sight and sound and touch and taste and smell, were incorporated into our interior world of thought and emotion and inspiration. Take, for example, the sense of hearing. Sound was thought to be almost liquid. It flowed into the ear and was channeled to a very specific part of the brain, a part called the common sense. It's a term not used in the way that we do today, like the practical application of knowledge, but the common sense was the hub where all the senses would deliver their input. From that common sense, information was not dispatched to chemistry, nor to impulse, not to synapses or sinews. The world of our senses was directly channeled to the heart, which would either dilate in excitement or constrict in fear. I love that notion that we could interpret our world and incorporate it by way of the heart. I believe for makers, for mechanics, for artists, the heart is not the final destination. I believe artists complete the cycle not by being vessels for inspiration, but rather becoming channels of it. Artists, through a primal, basic, fundamentally essential need pass on their understanding, their curiosity, their joy of, or outrage at an awesome world in the form of their unique art. Each choosing a method and its materials, giving voice to a message for the next person's response. Excuse me. Over the course of a lifetime of communicating by means of hand affecting material, it's inevitable that the material in turn affects the hand, a sort of use patina that renders each hand unique and beautiful and authentic. The American Artist Hand Archive records these individual truths, these physical credentials, by way of faithful, accurate bronze life castings. Each artist considers a gesture. Some relate to their hands in contemplation, some in concentration, or perhaps engaged in process, some choosing to use tools employed, while others simply present an outstretched hand as a unit of measure. Single hands, clasped hands, muscular or frail, massive or delicate, all of them powerful. These primary agents of creation become portraits of process. Metal, left untreated, responds to atmosphere. Exposure to the elements causes it to oxidize, to tarnish, to change color. The raw brightness of a new cast metal eventually mellows with time. It's informed by and identifies with its location. The green patina of the Statue of Liberty develops naturally as her ability to respond to and to protect from the influencing elements of New York Harbor. In the art foundry, the use of chemical formulations and heat accelerate surface change. Modern recipes, coupled with age-old ones, afford the sculptor an enormous palette of options. But the fundamental truth is metal responds to atmosphere. Whether acquired quickly through controlled chemistry or achieved slowly, it is still the result coming to patina. There's another kind of patina, one derived from use. If you arrived tonight by way of Grand Central Station, you walked on marble steps that have been worn and polished by the hundreds of thousands of feet that pass over them each day. Or the door handles on our library here are kept polished. One is brighter than the other as a result of being more often used. Even the cast iron newel posts in this great old building have been worn smooth by the generations of hands using them as pivot points at each landing. This patina goes beyond color and speaks to utility, to use, to love of object, to age and history. It is the skin-deep expression of the whole object, its reason and its intention. Tools acquire this unique kind of patina as well. Special tools, favorite tools, the special pen that we use that dispenses ink in a delicate flow that we love, or the one-of-a-kind brush worn to a perfect angle to carry paint in a predictable signature, or a loyal and reliable chisel, much used and much loved. These extensions of our hands and hearts become beautiful through use. The things we create with their help are more often than not the focus of our attention and appreciation, but on rare occasion, we get to glimpse the intimate relationship between the artist, the tool, and the creation. On your tables tonight are chisels. These chisels were used by a stonecutter named Charles Spence. He was born in 1867. With these chisels, he carved the stone blocks that became the lions in front of the public library 2 blocks away. With these hammers, these mallets, these toothed chisels, he gave form to the great clock on the facade of Grand Central Station. They cut the details for the Woolworth Building's first floor. They cut the details for the great portals of St. John the Divine. And they also were used to create and fashion the entry of the breakers in Newport, Rhode Island. The General Society has just become the steward of these implements. We have the opportunity to inspect them tonight and in a special way appreciate the work of uncelebrated artisans who enrich our daily lives by the efforts of their hands and their hearts. Even the tables you sit at tonight have the patina of use. Wood mellows, its color deepens. Some bear the occasional penknife tattoo. Their nicked edges and weakened joints have been witness to generations of searchers. They have borne the burdens of piled books, the frustrations of yet solved puzzles, and have been quiet partners in countless eureka moments. Through these, we enter a world that invites us to wander this space and to wonder our way to new ideas. As I get older, I'm only too aware that humans, too, are affected by atmosphere, by time and circumstance. Our mettle is tested through the challenges of life. The human hand, in all its complexity, its wonderful animation, seems to especially register this impact in profoundly beautiful and unique ways. The American Artist Hand Archive, through a captured bronze gesture, challenges us to consider the maker apart from the creation. These bronzes shed the trappings of celebrity, the well-earned notoriety of accomplishment, and lay bare and true the fact that the iconic images of our time are the works of just people. Robert Indiana's Love, Jasper John's Flag, Maya Lin's Vietnam War Memorial Wall, Chuck Close's monumental portraits, all are but the byproduct of one human heart's desire to connect with another. In a few moments, we will uncover the bronzes in front of you, and next to each, there's a small envelope with the artist's name inside. I encourage you to first appreciate the simple humanity before you attach it to an individual personality. If the archive were just a collection of life castings of influential artists' hands, I think that we would succeed with documenting something worthwhile. But with each new participant, it becomes clearer and clearer that we are not documenting celebrity, but rather the human need to communicate and to create. That is the archive's compelling goal. Its mission is to continue to acknowledge the contributions of the well-celebrated and the under-celebrated artists of our time. There is a certain kind of intimacy in holding another person's hand. It requires trust. That intimacy is magnified when you're molding another person's hand. Vanessa Hoheb has garnered that trust by way of a career of ushering countless of artists' works into being. Hands that by nature are animated in the pursuit of expression are asked to be still, to be vulnerable, as molds are made and impressions are secured. Vanessa's well-deserved reputation is founded in her deep commitment to excellence and her abiding belief in the essential role of the artist. These two principles inform and energize the American Artists Archive. With that, and in my script it says we'll dim the lights, but we've already done that, I'll turn over the podium to Vanessa, and she'll speak to the images that illustrate some of the impetus behind the archive and a selection of some of the participants included. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for all coming tonight to share this very special evening in this wonderful space. Let's see if I can do this. Two hands. Chew gum, walk. Many of you know the story of my growing up in my father's sculpture studio here in New York City, where I learned my trade in the many disciplines that make up sculpture. So I'm going to blow past that and jump right in because this project has been 10 years in the making, and I'm really excited to tell you about it. My father's hands were immensely powerful, veined and impressive in their ability to shape marble with a stone carving chisel and also to delicately model clay. An advertising guy met my father in his local diner and hired him for the day for an ad campaign for this. And he came home at the end of the day excited about the photo shoot. And I said, "How was it?" And he said, "Well, a paycheck is a paycheck." But he was very pleased. About 30 years ago, just fooling around, my father stuck his hand in a bucket of mold compound. He made a wax casting and he made a bronze casting of his hand. Many years have passed since my father's died, and this bronze has always lived on the workbenches in my studio. I came to realize how important it was for me to have this physical record of a hand that I knew so well, a hand that represents lessons of craftsmanship and process, tenacity, and the importance of the passing on of knowledge. This bronze casting captures a powerful moment in time, as well as the passage of time, and I cherish it. I thought a lot about the sculptors whose work we had cast over the years, and how their hands were also affected by the materials they chose to work with. The stone carvers had thickened arthritic wrists. The clay modelers had wide thumbs. And almost everyone had scars and even missing bits that told a story of their lives in shaping materials. So my idea was born to reach out to the artists whom I'd worked with for so long and create a collection of life castings in bronze to document the stories of the hands of these great makers of our time, to honor the impact that they had on materials, and to acknowledge the impact that the materials had on them. For years, I had worked on many sculptures for Jasper Johns, and we often ended our work sessions over a cup of tea talking about our arthritis. I told him about the hands project I was developing, and he simply said, "Good idea." So on a bitter cold day in January, I went to his studio to mold his hand. And while I was working on him, I was lamenting the fact that I'd had the privilege of working with so many extraordinary makers. Albert Wien, Frederick Hart, Louise Nevelson, and Willem de Kooning. But I didn't have the idea of molding their hands during those years. It was always the work. It was always the work. And then they died. And Jasper looked at his hand dripping in purple rubber, and he said, "And that process will continue." And I went home that night, and I went on Wikipedia, and I took my carefully alphabetized list of the artists that I wanted for my project, and I rearranged them chronologically. And without making too big a deal out of it, I just started reaching out to the elders in the group. In the 80s, I had done a series of castings for Robert Indiana. And I called him to ask him if he would participate in the archive, and he said, "I'd be delighted, but do you know where I live?" Well, yes, he lives 15 miles off the coast of Maine on an island. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you get the New York Times and milk delivered? And he said, well, of course. And I said, well, then that's my problem. I'll get to you. So my husband and I drove up 8 hours along the coast of Maine. And in the morning, David dropped me off at the ferry, and off I went with my little mold shop on wheels. Bob had said, that he lived next to the post office, but he didn't give me a street address. When I walked up the long hill and I turned the corner, his house was really easy to spot. He ushered me in, and we had tea, and it was sort of an interview. He had remembered me, but when I showed him the bronze castings that I had brought, he was smitten with the detail, excited about the project, and then he abruptly said, "Now, you must sign the guest book, and then I must show you my house." Terrific. He was intent on showing me every single room and telling tales of his treasures. "The rug you're standing on was given to me by Louise Nevelson." I wanted to do that. And there were stuffed animals everywhere, and every animal had a special place and a special name. It was a thrill for me to see the photographs he was in the process of archiving, and to see the artwork he had made when he was 6 years old. When we finally got to the molding, I put my apron on him because although it was May Day, I didn't want him to get all messed up. I thought that's okay. But he insisted that his photographer take the photograph, and he insisted that his animals be in the frame of that image. I said, okay. Of the process, he said, well, it's very icky, but it's interesting. And he was very pleased with the bronze casting. This is Kenneth Snelson with one of his fabulously complex stainless steel sculptures. It was fabricated at Polish Talix Foundry, and it went on to Japan. Kenneth was totally enthusiastic about participating in the archive. We spent a lot of time rummaging around his studio downtown, playing with all the stuff on the bench. It was a true Santa's workshop. Kenneth was interested to hold a favorite tool, a calibrated measuring stick he'd made from aluminum to help him plot out the proportions of his models. While we work, I ask the artists about the life of their hands. We talk about accidents or injuries that may have changed how they work, temporarily or permanently. Kenneth's tale of the smashed thumb from a 2x4 on one hand led to the tale of the missing fingernail on the other. In 1965, a doctor had cauterized a wart on the nail, and it was never the same. And it was a constant nuisance to him because it made making things so much more difficult. What a dumb-ass doctor, he said. And don't you manicure that nail, he warned me. I worked very hard for that. Indeed. When I called Beverly Pepper and told her about the project, she barely let me finish, and she said, I cook with my hands, I sew with my hands, I weld, I work, I do everything. No one has ever asked me to do this before. How can I help you? And I said, well, your only assignment is to think of a gesture that's interesting to you and to sit in one spot for just a minute. She said, this is my default position when I'm thinking. While we were working, I asked Beverly what she thought was perhaps the most important quality an artist needed to survive, if perhaps thrive. And I thought for sure she was going to say persistence. And she said courage. And her words guide me to this day. Judy Pfaff was not thinking about a particular gesture, but much more fascinated by the materials I was using. I had to keep reminding her to sit still for just a few minutes, at least until the rubber set. That's Judy. When I brought the finished bronze to her studio to get her input on the patina, she pointed to her boot and said, can you do that? I said, yeah. And patinist Rosemary Rednauer just nailed it. When my son Dana saw the patina, he said, Mom, this looks like something you'd see in the Hubble Space Telescope. And everyone that sees these bronzes says, that's Judy. Eric Fischl was thinking more about the final form that the bronze would take rather than a specific gesture. It felt very fitting to use the same patina he had guided me through on many of his life-size bronzes. More drippy, he would say. Eric has been a great supporter of the archive since the beginning, lending an ear and giving wise advice when I needed it the most. He's written many letters of support in my search for grants over the years. He wrote, in part, "The fascination we have for the artist's hand throughout history is what she has recognized and has inspired her project. The artist's hand represents to us the embodiment of both the mystery and the mastery of creativity itself." Martin Purrier, ever thoughtful, took about 4 months to decide on the gesture. And on the day, he stretched his hand out as wide as he could, and he said simply, "This is how I measure my wood." Martin chose to have his hand cast in manganese bronze because he was very intrigued by the color, and it was very successful. Huma Baba, a fearless and inventive maker, utilizes every material that comes her way. She says, "I like texture, I work with my hands, and I like to feel it." Recently, I molded Todd McGrain, who chose a gesture that was his go-to position for hands that hurt at the end of almost every day. Titus Gaffar has immersed himself in learning many of the old techniques and utilizing them in saying something new with his work now. Titus had a show at the National Portrait Gallery last season, and he wrote to the Smithsonian in support of this archive. He said, "As a country, we've lost many artists of this generation, and Vanessa's work is a celebration of their lives, their passion, and their skill summarized in the castings of their hands. I can't think of a more appropriate place to exhibit an archive like this." How about that? So, while exciting conversations are underway, the work continues. There are 25 artists whose hands are complete in this ongoing endeavor and more in progress. Tom Otterness, Kiki Smith, who said, "I don't think about my hands unless they hurt." And Bill Crozier, whose chosen gesture of modeling clay is classic Bill. My whole life in the studio has been about collaboration. The quality and integrity of these exchanges have opened doors and enabled me to travel this path. To the artists who have so enthusiastically embraced the archive, I am so grateful for your trust, beyond measure. My husband David and son Dana have been my backbone of support and have never failed to say the words, "We believe in you," at exactly the right moments. Thomas Donahue, my partner in grime, yes, grime with a G, of almost 40 years, who understands on a visceral level the importance and need for this body of work, provides an endless source of refinement and ideas, always delivered with a steady hand. As I've spent my life helping artists realize their vision, I in turn have been fortunate to have some of the finest craftspeople in this country help me with my work. The wax makers and reworkers, the foundry teams, the metal finishers, the patinists, our brilliant photographer, Mark Lacko, all with their finely honed skills. These artisans have been critical to the success of the archive, and I am indebted to them. excellence in any branch of life implies voluntary exertion. And so, we push on. Thank you.
It's interesting to watch 40 years of your life flash before you and know that life is not ending, but in some ways just beginning. This is an amazing project, and as artistic director of it, it's a great honor. The wonderful and powerful thing about the arts is made evident in the art's ability to look at the same thing from different angles. We have sound, we have movement, we have the manipulating of materials, the crafting of words, each providing another kind of silhouette, a different angle, rounding out the dimensions of a thought in unexpected and welcomed ways. When given the opportunity to present the archive in Amsterdam a few years ago, we looked to a poet to describe, from their unique perspective, the archive project. The American poet Irene O'Garden was commissioned to consider our effort, resulting in what has become a moving telling of our mission statement. Irene is here tonight, and she's agreed to read her The Hands of Masters. And I'd like to ask her to come up and do that for us.
Well, first of all, it's my hope that both your hand and Vanessa's hands get molded and as part of this project, because I think you guys are tremendous, tremendous, tremendous artists. It was such an honor to be asked to meditate on this beautiful project, and this is what resulted. The hands of masters. Stars and squares and crosses ray the flesh. Ripple knuckles, furrow inborn whorls. Such glyphs are shorthand for the chords and coils of process. Cup and slap, reject, caress. Creation's verbs reverberate these surfaces, more intimate than faces, free of masks. Torqued and tempered by their massive task, composing the intangible in space. The hands of masters are the culture's thumb, by which we grasp the fortune in our palms, meaning which exhilarates and calms, and wisdom, which is lost, wax, found.
Okay, folks, now I get the comfortable, I get to turn the paper over. I don't have to read now. We're going to unveil the bronzes. Now, in front of each of you is a pair of curatorial gloves, or cotton gloves. We ask you that you put them on. We're going to encourage you to hold the bronzes. You can touch them. You can pick them up. They're heavy. They're between 5, 6, 7, and 8 pounds, so just be aware of that. They are irreplaceable. There's an envelope, like I mentioned before, that has the artist's name on them. But take a look at the hand first. Some of those you saw in Vanessa's presentation there. You're also welcome to pick up Charles Spence's chisels and see what those feel like. I kind of believe that there's energy still left in some of those. You can take the napkins, the drop cloths, the veils off the sculptures, and enjoy the experience of them. The only thing we do ask you is that we would like you not to take photographs of the pieces this evening. But please, when we stop for a reception, you're going to be able to go around to tables and see hands that are not at your particular table. So with that, enjoy. Okay. Jenny?
Are they going to give a presentation? They said you just killed my...
Could I just have your... Sorry, it's a little louder than I intended. Just before you begin to discover these treasures that are in front of you, we would just like to say a few words. First of all, I want to extend our heartfelt thanks to two incredible artisans who both spoke so thoughtfully and eloquently about the process of art. And they, to follow the quote from Irene, you are also the masters. To see those extraordinary hands, it was just completely moving, and your presentation was just outstanding. So please accept our thanks, and we would like... Really, what an extraordinary presentation. And we would just like to make a presentation to you, and to do so is our Executive Director, Victoria Dengel.
Yes, no, please. Vanessa and Thomas, I feel richer. I feel richer for this experience that you've given us. I can't wait to get lost in the words that both of you spoke tonight, because I want to read them again and again, because I feel like it's a luxurious experience knowing you, loving you, and I just can't say enough about that, and your work and what you're bringing to life here. It's a true celebration. It's a magnificent celebration of the art of craftsmanship. It's the acknowledgement of the work of artisans, the work that we all acknowledge or should acknowledge to feel life in a rich way on a daily basis. Being in this building and thinking of the craftsmen who brought this together and have given us a gift for life and for generations. And so thank you for all that you've done on behalf of the work of craftsmanship and these wonderful artisans that you have made immortal. So thank you so much. I can't say enough. And I just want to let you know that the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen has made a donation to the project in the amount of $500, but even more so is that this is your home. It is the home of the artisans and of the project. Any way the society can support our brothers and sisters in their work, it is a gift and an honor, and I love knowing you. Irene, I also want to say the poetry, thank you so much, Irene O'Gordon. Oh, so touching and magical. And I think I want to hang out with you more because I really love you guys. This is a spiritual experience. Beautiful. Okay, Mark, yes. Yes. So on behalf of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, we would like to express our gratitude to Vanessa Hoheb, artisan, and Thomas Donahue, artisan, for an introduction, and we just can't wait for more, to the American Artists Hand Archive Project for your participation in the General Society Artisan Lecture Series. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I want Thomas.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
You do so well.
Right.
Oh, guys.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Oh my
Do we have anything more to say?
Yeah. So we won't keep you from the hands anymore, but we do just a couple of things. First of all, this, as we said, this is the final lecture of the series, and what a magnificent way to conclude it. I do also want to remind you what Thomas just said, that please take no photographs of the hands, and also to remind you that cheese and wine and patina and metal hands and bronze hands do not mix. So we will ask you not to go anywhere near the food and the bronze hands. And finally, we also just want to say that this is such an incredible archive, and there is an opportunity to support it. And you, as we have done, can do so by going to Vanessa's website, which is vanessahoheb.com. And then you will find information about the Artist Archive. So if this is something you would be interested in supporting, we would thank you. Again, thank you for coming this evening, and we look forward to seeing you at the reception afterwards. Thank you.